So in celebration and recognition of Black History Month, this month we're getting to speak with Black history makers. And recently you were brought into a new position at Yale University and given an endowed chair. Dr. Nii, could you help us understand a little bit about the significance of this, as well as what that means kind of in layman's terms?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here in this interview format. Even as I'm hearing you talk about Black History Maker, that still feels very humbling and a bit surreal, because I don't often think about, or rarely think about myself in those ways. But at the same time, I also acknowledge, the opportunities that God has given me and the ways that the position I have is making impact, especially as I hear from different people in the community and them just saying what an inspiration I've been to them or how they've learned things from the work that we've been doing in a lot of ways. So I humbly acknowledge that and also know that there's a responsibility that comes with that as well. But to your question, the endowed chair really is an honor, first of all, but it also reflects the commitment of the university in a very tangible way to say that we are behind the work that you're doing. We value it, and we're also going to financially commit to that work as well. So very practically speaking, it actually has tangible outcomes on how we do this work in terms of the research in the lab, a lot of the diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism efforts that I'm involved in, and the community work I'm involved in with the podcast. And it kind of gives financial backing to some of that, and also allows me to actually hire more staff to make sure that we have a team that's equipped to keep us moving forward in all these different endeavors.
Now, very specifically, why this is a historic promotion is I believe you are the first man of African descent or a Black man to receive this endowed chair in your department. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly correct. So very, very honored to be able to continue the legacy of a lot of people who sewn into me, some other African Americans in the department. But yes, I'm the first African American in my department to have an endowed chair.
Dr. Nii, as a man of faith and as a neuroscientist, you are beautifully positioned to speak to the intersection of faith, our mental health, and our spirituality. And you actually got to do this and lead our church in a moment. In 2019, you brought together our church and a panel of extraordinary speakers in a God, mental health, and wellness event held at the incredible Salvation Army Hall. Would you speak a little bit to our community about where these streams intersect for you and how you see them working together?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to think about these things in the intersection because of who we are as people. So I think in a lot of ways, there's a tendency for us to try and not intentionally, but fragment ourselves into different components. So there's the spiritual component of me. Maybe there's the family component, which hopefully has a spiritual influencing it. There's my work component. And there's things about, maybe my biology. But in reality, God created us as whole beings. It's not something that we separate. But there's a tendency definitely for us to do that when we're talking about mental health. So maybe if I'm thinking about just my overall mental health, I'm going to approach things from a spiritual perspective only and make sure that I'm praying through things, which is important. But then let's say I have a physical ailment. Okay, well, that's biology. So I'm going to go to the doctor and get treated for that. Or let's say that there's something like we always talk about, someone's broken their arm. They're going to get a cast for it rather than just pray over it. But I think it's important for us to remember that even in the context of mental health, these things intersect as well. So there's evidence showing how being in faith communities can impact how we navigate through mental health, wellness, and mental health challenges. Prayer can also influence that, can act on our brains. But seeing a psychologist can also influence that. Taking a medication can also influence that. So a lot of what we're talking about is making sure that we don't segment these things, but think about who we are as whole people and how has God allowed us to equip ourselves to approach our mental health and to deal with any mental health challenges that come up along the way. So for me, one of the key moments, I guess, in my development, thinking about this intersection just came from my experiences. So I remember at one point teaching a class to medical students at Yale and talking a lot about what happens in the brain during drug craving and relapse. So, speaking about the neuroscience and trying to help the students understand how we can understand those processes and maybe try to help people move through some of those challenges. But there was one student in the class who, acknowledged what we were talking about, raised their hand and said, okay, well, what are we supposed to do with those individuals who think that a higher power can somehow help them move through their mental health challenges? So basically completely dismissing the spiritual side of things, even though there's a lot of evidence showing that being a member of a community and a faith community can actually help people move through mental health challenges. And of course, a lot of us can share experiences of having seen the power of prayer as well. At the same time, I also remember giving a talk in a different situation to a group of college students, again, talking about some of these same principles. One of the students raised their hand and said, well, I'm not sure how to talk with my aunt because it seems like she's dealing with some depression and anxiety. And she keeps being told that the only reason she's not getting better is because she isn't praying hard enough. So in that instance, you have someone who is focused on the spiritual, but completely ignoring everything we know about the biology of the brain and how it impacts our mental health. So for me, those two experiences really kind of galvanized me, frustrated me on both sides to see each side acknowledging something good, but completely ignoring the other aspects. And so for me and for many others, it's been important to make sure that we take into account all these components that affect our mental health. We should pay attention to the spiritual and not ignore the biology. We should pay attention to the biology, not ignore the spiritual. We have to also acknowledge how psychological interventions can impact our mental health. We also have to be honest about, how traumas and racist experiences can also impact our mental health. We can't pretend those things exist. So with all these things, we try and take it all into account. And that's why in a lot of ways, we've done a podcast on the intersection of mental health, neuroscience, faith, culture, and social justice, because they all make an impact.
That's huge. And for those of us who want to find your podcast, where would we find that?
So anywhere you listen to podcasts, it's on all platforms, and it's called Addy Hour. So pretty easy to remember. We also have a website, addyhour.com.
Yeah, I look forward to tuning into the Addy Hour. Thank you. Who for you has been an inspiration from Black history or just from your life? You've referenced a few, but maybe there's a story of a moment that you've been inspired either from Black history or from somebody walking with you in your life that's helped you overcome or help you press on into what God is now doing through you.
Yeah. So for me, there are several people that come to mind. One that comes to mind initially is Dr. James Townsel, who actually passed away about a year ago or so. But he was one of the first African-American scientists that I was able to interact with on a regular basis, who had really been invested in this work for years. So I was really fortunate to take part in a fellowship program or a summer program where they brought scientists together and basically mentored us about these aspects. So he talked about, his experiences as being one of the first African-Americans in his program and how he had to navigate that. He also talked a lot about mentoring. So again, really this idea of sowing into the next generation. And for me, that's when I really caught the bug, I would say, about just the benefit of being in an academic space where I could really invest in people, mentor them. So there's a lot of teaching that comes in that, and having people in my research group or people outside my research group that I can mentor and see them grow up into this walk. And in a lot of ways, that really parallels what we do with discipleship in the body of Christ. So making sure that we take the things that people have sown into us and pass it on to others. So for me, having someone like him as a pillar who had been doing this for years, clearly invested in me, has made a huge difference. And there are several others that have served in that role as well. Another one I'll mention is Dr. Joanne Berger-Sweeney, who's the president of Trinity College, who's also involved in that program and has also served in the mentoring role as an African-American neuroscientist and now president of a college. So these folks who have paved the way for me. And again, just to even go back to what you said at the beginning, it's again so humbling to think of myself as someone who's making impact in that way, because I can clearly see all those who've done that for me as well.
Well, I'm blessed that you get to join the ranks of people truly making history and that you're a part of our community. Dr. Nii, thank you. Thank you as well to your incredible wife, Dr. Tracy, and your two extraordinary kids for being a part of this community. Together, we get to make history together. We get to follow the Lord together. We get to walk in greater and greater degrees of health and well-being. So thank you for the work that you're doing, both in your family, in the academic community, in your research lab, and in our church community. Thank you so much. We're blessed to know you, sir.